So, dear participants, welcome back to our post-lunch session today. We are very happy to have Professor R.C. Pradhan with us this afternoon. He's one of the most eminent philosophers of our country. He was a professor of philosophy at Hyderabad Central University. He has many uh, highly acclaimed books and articles to his credit. I don't want to waste time listing those. So we are very happy to have Professor Pradhan with us. So Professor Pradhan, you are very much welcome to this course on Western philosophy organized by Bhaktivedanta Research Center. So in the morning, we had two very nice lectures on the problem of universals in
Yeah,
Western metaphysics. So
yeah.
now we will start, venturing into another domain of Western philosophy, Western metaphysics, namely realism, anti-realism debate. So over to you, Professor Pradhan, now.
Okay, thank you, Professor Chakrabarti. I am extremely grateful to you and Professor Sen for inviting me to this course, and I welcome all the participants to my lecture on realism and anti-realism debate. I'm really very happy to know that Bhaktivedanta Research Center is organizing a week-long course on Western philosophy. My topic will be, as you already know, on contemporary debate between the realist and the anti-realist. And this is really one of the most dominant features of contemporary analytic philosophy. So, all of you who have been acquainted with analytic philosophy must have known that analytic philosophy itself has many debates within it, like synthetic and analytic distinction debate, the fact value debate. Like that, we have the debate between realism and anti-realism. Uh, this debate has, as Professor Chakravarti has indicated, uh, some core issues, namely those relating to the nature of reality or the world, and also the nature of truth and meaning, and also the nature of values. So, in fact, the contemporary debate in between realism and anti-realism is concerning both metaphysics and semantics and also moral theory. So my focus will be mostly on the metaphysical aspect of this debate and also the semantical aspect of the debate. And I will draw some conclusions regarding the debate in moral philosophy. So let me start with the idea why realism has been uh, always at the center of a controversy. As you know that in the classical period of Western philosophy, realism was attacked by the idealists. You remember how Berkeley developed his idealism as a reaction to Locke's idea of the thing I know not, the unknowable substance which Locke posited. It was a realist position, and Berkeley really attacked it, and he came out with his dictum: the to be is to be perceived. So all reality is mind dependent. Again, the same kind of debate we find in Kant. Kant really gave the slogan that the world cannot be known unless it is dependent on our mind. So, so in a sense, he said that the what is called the Copernican revolution, that the reality is mind dependent. The reality is structured through our concepts and categories. Though he retained the thing in itself, that means he retained the vestige of realism, but he was pro-idealism precisely because he thought that the knowable world, that the world which he calls the phenomenal world, could not be what it is unless mind intervenes in the very structure of this world. So idealism was really, idealism took a new turn with Kant, overcame the limitations of Berkeleyan idealism, and laid the path for absolute idealism, which flourished in the works of Hegel. Now, this is the side story for us because realism has never been unchallenged in the history of philosophy. Now, let me just briefly tell why 20th century philosophy again raised the same debate, realism versus its opponents. Though in the 20th century philosophy, realism is not opposed by idealism because idealism has taken a backseat. Instead, we have something called anti-realism, which could be understood in terms of idealism also, but that is a different story. Uh, anyway, realism became the dominant strand of 20th century, early 20th century philosophy. All of us remember how G. Moore defended realism against idealism, especially Berkeleyan idealism, and how he refuted Mark Taggart's idea that the world is space-time world is unreal. So he established what is called the commonsensical realism. So that is the way 20th century really started with a realistic note, because much of science is realism in practice, because science explores an external world which is there. So if it is already in our mind and already dependent on our mind, then study of the mind itself will be the science of the external world. But that is not the case. Science has to go to the external world and explore it, and thereby it can only know what is there in the external world. And that is all about science. So science really started with realism. And though anti-realistic scientific methods are also available, but more or less science and philosophy of science is realistic in its approach. Now, anti-realism became popular in the writings of the philosophers like Wittgenstein, especially later Wittgenstein, and Michael Dummett. And realism really stood its ground in the works of Frege, who championed some form of Platonism in his idea of the sense, and also his idea of mathematical objects. So you all know that Frege was a realist. And Russell was no less a realist, but so far as mathematics is concerned. And but he was really ambivalent regarding the external world, because he thought external world is can be really built out of sense data. So in that sense, he conceded some ground to anti-realism, but he remained more or less a scientific-minded, realistic thinker. But the question, as we proceed further, Frege's Platonism, both in mathematics and logic, and also in semantics, did not remain unchallenged. Precisely because the notion of sense, which Frege gave, led to the idea that sense is not mind-dependent. Sense, perhaps we can translate it in our language as meaning, is not mind-dependent. That is, meaning is not in the mind, as later on Putnam put it. Meanings are not in the head. So Frege was the first to tell us that sense must be mind independent. It is an objective entity. So also truth is something objectively there, which we have to discover. Truth is to be discovered and not to be constructed. That was how Frege was trying to build his theory of truth. And so far as logic is concerned, he was a fully committed Platonist, that logical truths are eternal and they have nothing to do with the space-time world. So in that sense, he is really pushing forward for some kind of Platonism. But this did not remain unchallenged, because realism, even if it is so convincing and it has solid arguments for it, yet it leaves the mind out of the whole picture. If Frege is taken into consideration, then human mind has no role to play so far as logic and mathematics is concerned, excepting that it only apprehends what the mathematical truth is and what the world is. So in that sense, mind becomes really, as we can say, really takes a back seat in Frege. He was an anti-psychologist, as you know. Psychology has nothing to do with logic, and psychology has nothing to do with epistemology either. And therefore, he thought to rule out mind altogether from the whole uh, picture of the universe. But this remained really something one has to bother about. Though the early Wittgenstein was more or less a Fregean so far as the external world is concerned, and to some extent, logical truths also for early Wittgenstein remain transcendental. So, in that sense, to some extent, Fregean and Platonic. So, but the later Wittgenstein really draw new roadmap for analytic philosophy, much against the wishes of Frege and Russell. And they were his early gurus, but he really went against them. As we can see, that he suggested that if we take language seriously, and language is a human form of life, that is how later Wittgenstein put it. Language cannot be having a structure which has nothing to do with how human beings really use language. So language is a practical activity of human beings. Language use is a practical activity. Therefore, language is a kind of form of life. And language games really became so such a radically new concept that Fregean idea of truth, reality, etc., remained really could not be really digested anymore if we look at the world and language through the prism of Wittgenstein's later philosophy. So let us see what were the decisive conclusions which Wittgenstein really pushes forward so far as the realism anti-realism debate is concerned. Now, Wittgenstein is, in a sense, questioning his own Fregean legacy in his early philosophy, where it is suggested that the world is independent of language, of which language is just a picture, a logical picture. That is, the world is there, which has to be really pictured by language. That is what the Tractarian theory of about picture says. But this was unconvincing, as the later Wittgenstein could sense. If the world is standing apart, if the world is independent of us, then how does this language or our language capture that world? So there is something missing, according to later Wittgenstein, in this whole picture. Perhaps language and world have been put apart or have been kept apart by the realists for their own axe to grind, because they have to really define the reality not in terms of mind and language, but the world itself is already a thing in itself, which can't really, in a sense, retain in its philosophy. So if the world is in a thing in itself, which is independent of our language, our mind, then the question is, how do we know it? So is there not a possibility of skepticism? That is not realism really allowing for skepticism or making a road for skepticism? If there is a gap between reality and language and mind, then definitely mind can never know it. And if the thing in itself, that is the world in itself, remains unknowable in its essentiality, then skepticism is bound to crop up. So in that sense, really later Wittgenstein thought about it and found that the reality that we really think about must be somewhere nearer language, in the sense that language must be one which is revealing the structure of the reality. what can be what can the reality be other than what is already available within our language games? If I am talking about the computer before me, I am playing a language game with the computer. I am seeing it, I am touching it, I am speaking about it. In a sense, the computer is already a part of my language games, already a part of my activities. So in that sense, reality is already within me, within our language. And therefore, language has much to do with what the reality itself is. The reality cannot be, as the realists say, independent of language. So in a sense, later Wittgenstein is bringing both language and thought into the picture, because wherever there is language, there is thought, and vice versa. So if the world is not independent of language, then the world is also not independent of thought. That is, the world that we are talking about is a thinkable world, is a linguistically understandable world, and it is part of, in a sense, our whole spectrum of our language games. So in this sense, really anti-realism took its roots in late Wittgenstein, where the idea of reality has been really, the realist notion of reality has been really reconstructed. It is not that the reality has been given up. That is not the case. Reality will be there, whether we want it or not, and the reality must be within our reach. That is what later Wittgenstein said. It is not beyond our reach or beyond the reach of our language, because it is already sucked into the network of our linguistic activities. So in that sense, really, anti-realism has a nice way to keep its foot inside the whole scenario. So anti-realism is now back into the focus. Some people say it is idealism, like, for example, William says Wittgenstein is preaching a form of linguistic idealism, but let us not go into that. Let us stick to the anti-realistic understanding of Wittgenstein. Now, this idea that reality is already within the circumference of language and thought, then what about truth itself? This is the most important aspects of contemporary anti-realistic strategy, that we must take the concept of truth squarely. We must take away the notion of truth which the realists have propounded so far. Realists have really thought that truth must be also independent of the human language and also human mind. The truth must be something eternal, something fixed, and something really timeless. So if that is so, then truth only has to be discovered, and truth can never be properly within the grasp of human mind. Because if truth is to be discovered, then truth may always go out of the grasp of the human thought. So truth cannot be so elevated that we can never reach it. So that is the crux of the anti-realistic strategy, that truth must be taken out of the clutch of the realists. The realists have really made truth so godlike, so divine-like, that we can never know it. Perhaps we may always fail to know the truth, and we will maybe always in massive falsehood, we may be in massive illusion. That is, of course, the way we have to argue against the realists. So the first attack was on the theory of truth called correspondence theory of truth. That was the citadel of the realistic, both metaphysics, epistemology, and also semantics. So correspondence theory really had to go. And for many reasons, correspondence theory has been always in controversy, because the question of correspondence between reality and language, or a fact and a sentence, is always controversial for reasons which are very clear. that there are two dissimilar things. Language and reality are two dissimilar things. So then how can we really say that one will correspond to the other? How can something which is linguistic will correspond to something which is non-linguistic? So it is a stretch of imagination which you have to depend on to establish correspondence. So correspondence theory really had to bow down to the attack of the anti-realists. So what the anti-realists really suggested, and Wittgenstein perhaps gave the hints, and Michael Dummett took over the whole program. In fact, it is Michael Dummett who has coined the word anti-realism. It is to his credit that we have the notion of anti-realism in analytic philosophy. Wittgenstein didn't use the word anti-realism, though he prepared the ground for what anti-realism is saying now. So what Dummett tells us that truth cannot be so independent of us that it becomes cognition transcendent. That means it becomes a transcendental truth. It transcends the human mind, human cognition. We can know the truth, but truth is not that which is always within the circumference of knowledge. Truth must transcend the cognition. That was the realist view. If truth doesn't transcend cognition, then it is not truth. Because anything that is within the human mind and human mind's grasp, it may not be the truth. It can be an illusion also. It can be falsehood according to realists. But Dummett argued that truth must be cognition immanent. Truth must be such that it is within the cognitive grasp of the human mind or the human beings. Now let us see what was his argument for this. He says if a sentence like snow is white is true, it is not only because the fact is snow is white, and this is a concession to realism, but it is also a difference from realism that this fact is within the cognitive grasp of ours. We can go and see what the fact of truth, snow being white is. That means this fact is a construction within our language, because there cannot be a fact which is never expressed in language. What are those unknowable facts? We never know that. Fact is that it is a fact for us. So therefore, whenever somebody says snow is white and says it is a true statement, he must be knowing, or he must be able to know that there is a fact that snow is white. So there is nothing mysterious about it, and there is nothing Platonic about it, and there is nothing really Fregean about it, because that fact is within our cognitive grasp. So truth must be like the fact within our cognitive grasp. That is, truth must be cognition immanent, cognition dependent, that is mind dependent. To what extent we can say it is mind dependent? Does it mean mind constructs a truth, or mind makes a truth? No. If mind makes a truth, that doesn't make it a truth at all. It becomes then everybody can make a truth on his own. So that is not the case. What he is pleading for is that this truth must be the within the cognitive grasp of all human beings, all human thought, all human language. Like snow is white. This statement is true because its truth is within our cognitive grasp. We can verify the statement. We can see whether actually there is snow is white or not. So in this sense, the entire structure of our truth-making propositions, or truth-having propositions, or truth-bearing propositions are cognitively available. So Platonism is out. So Fregeanism is also out. because we cannot straight away say that a sentence is true or false. If we say that a sentence is determinately true or false, as the realist said, then it will be a kind of logical blunder. And this is what Debate calls the principle of bivalence. That classical logic, to which Frege was committed, and to which most of the logicians are committed, excepting those who go for non-classical logics, they accept this principle of bivalence, that every proposition must be determinately true or false. And in the bracket, in the hypothesis, we can say, independently of our decision procedures. That means whether we can decide the truth of a proposition or not, whether there is a proof of this proposition or not, we can say with confidence, with a logical confidence, that the proposition will be either true or false. And that is like the eternal truth. A proposition must be either true or false. But Debate raises the question, how do you know? The question of knowledge has to be raised. You have to show how you decide that the proposition is true or false. If I say this computer is before me, I have a way of deciding whether this proposition is true or false. So decision procedures have to be taken into account. Therefore, he said truth must be provable or decidable. That means it is not that truth is so far away. That would be the realist position, and that is the really weakness of realism, according to Michael Dement. So Michael Dement really questions. It doesn't follow that he doesn't accept truth at all. No, he is not a Rothschild who rejects the very concept of truth itself. No, he says truth, every proposition, he is after all a logician. He says every proposition will be true or false. But that truth or falsity must be decided. We must be able to decide it within a certain time. If somebody says that truth will be decided in infinite time, that is no solution of the problem. He says that truth must be decidable within a finite time. That means within a finite stretch of time, we should be able to decide whether a statement is true or not, whether a scientific theory is true or not. Therefore, he calls it a kind of verification strategy, which must really be incorporated into our semantics, and therefore truth must be decidable. And along with that, he says meaning must be also such that we cannot depend on for the meaning of statements on the truth conditions, because again we will be really committing a mistake, because those truth conditions will follow from the principle of bivalence. So therefore, we must really go for a new theory of meaning, because according to him, meaning theory is central to philosophy of language. And the notion of truth really, for him, can take a backseat for some time, because meaning should be really first clear. Because you know, in order to know whether a sentence is true or false, you must know its meaning first. So the meaning cannot be dependent on truth or falsity, because truth or falsity has to be decided. So meaning must be, in a sense, autonomous. It must be independent of the truth conditions. Therefore, meaning must be derived from the language itself, that is, from language issue itself. And therefore, Michael Dement really goes back to later Wittgenstein to derive his basic inputs for a theory of meaning. That meaning must be dependent on our practical ability to use a language, or use the relevant language game or relevant sentences. So he says truth is a theory of truth is a theory of understanding. That is, theory of meaning will, sorry, I'm changing it. The theory of meaning is a theory of understanding. That is, to know the meaning of a sentence is to understand what the sentence really does in our language, in our daily behavior, in our language game. So in that sense, meaning must be directly derived from language itself or language use itself. And this is how he reiterates Wittgenstein's famous use theory of meaning by suggesting that meaning is not the same as use, but meaning is derived from use or is dependent on use, in the sense that without the use of language, without the practical way of using language, we can never know its meaning. So meaning has to really withdraw itself from the truth conditions, and now the meanings must be attached to the assertion conditions, or what is otherwise called the justification conditions of the sentences. If we know the verification procedure for a sentence, we if we are able to decide its truth or falsity, we already know how we use the sentence. And by this, we also know how to assert the sentence or how to deny it. So the assertion conditions of a sentence will really define the meaning of the sentences. Here, let me introduce another contemporary of Michael Dummett, who really defends some form of realism, and that is Donald Davidson, the American philosopher. They are contemporaries, and perhaps they were engaged in some kind of a continuing debate regarding their semantic positions. Dummett, as we know from our understanding of his so popular writings, many of them are taught in our classrooms nowadays. The famous Meaning and Truth paper, which is included in his Inquiries into Truth and Interpretation. This is a classic paper which really, in a sense, suggests some kind of realism, though not the classical notion of realism with a correspondence theory of truth. And he is a realist, as I can understand, because he suggests that the meaning of a sentence is dependent on its truth conditions. So for him, truth is prior to meaning. If you have a theory of truth for a language, then you can also have a theory of meaning for that language. So in a sense, he adopted the famous Tarskian strategy in expounding the truth of the famous sentence, snow is white. And as you know, he said snow is white is true if and only if snow is white. This Tarskian strategy he really introduced only to avoid what is called the correspondence of theory of truth, and however to retain truth as a logical concept, as a very indispensable concept, as very fundamental to language and its semantics. He really took this logical step of adopting Tarski without trying to define truth. In fact, he suggested that defining truth is a folly, is a mistake. You must not try to define truth, which Tarski really tried to do, but he failed because truth is so fundamental, so primitive that you cannot define it. To define it is to presuppose the considered truth itself. So in that sense, he said truth must be taken as fundamental, as a primitive concept. But anyway, we can explain how truth works. That is what Davidson did, that he explained that how truth works. Truth works as a predicate of a sentence, and such that you can always make a T sentence like snow is white is true if and only if snow is white. So in that sense, really truth becomes really an important concept, fundamental concept. And for him, meaning depends on the truth conditions of the sentence. This is what I could call a realist position. And so far as the notion of reality is concerned, he did not really doubt the idea that it is language which talks about reality, though not in a picture way, not in any other way, but language is always about the reality. So language is not language doesn't construct a reality. Language really, in a sense, reveals reality. Language is about reality. So reality is intact. So in that sense, he is likely to go with the realist that reality cannot be mind dependent in any case. Mind dependent in any case. So in this sense, really, the realism anti-realism debate, as I can see, goes on two rails. One, a metaphysical rail, the other is a semantic rail. On the metaphysical dimension of this debate, we see that reality has been asked by the anti-realists to be taken out of its Platonic aura, as to taken out of its Platonic straitjacket, and to make it not a thing in itself, but thing as it appears in our language, a thing within our language. So if you can think of a world within our language, then you will be declared anti-realist. Now, I will introduce now another important philosopher who took this line of thought. He is Hilary Putnam, another American philosopher who gave us what he called internal realism, which was a direct challenge to realism, classical metaphysical realism. But since he could not really disown the notion of reality itself, and even anti-realists don't disown the notion of reality, but they want to restructure it. They want to redefine it. In fact, Putnam really did redefine reality. He said reality must be within our conceptual structure. That is exactly what Wittgenstein wanted to say, that reality must be within our language. Our frame of language will tell what the reality is. As he suggests somewhere, grammar tells what the reality is. So in that sense, reality cannot be anywhere other than where our language is. So if that is the case, then Putnam opens the metaphysical argument for an anti-realist position, though he calls himself an internalist position. He doesn't call himself anti-realist, but that is exactly what we mean by anti-realism. Reality must be already within our conceptual structure. There cannot be a reality which has no conceptual basis for us. This is what Kant had suggested, and Putnam is really re-emphasizing it, that a reality is already conceptually structured. So how can we get a reality about which we can never talk, about which we can never think? So reality must be within conceptual structure. But whose conceptual structure? That was the question which was raised to Putnam. He said, not in Putnam's conceptual structure or my conceptual structure or anybody. It is human conceptual structure. The conceptual structure which is available in one's language. And this language is a common language, language of humanity. And similar, the conceptual structure is a structure given to all human beings. If the reality is captured within our conceptual structure, then that is the reality that we know. And a reality which is non-conceptualized, which is never thinkable, which is never linguistically expressible, is a myth, is a misnomer. So this was his stand, and this really reiterated the internalist stand, the anti-realist stand, that reality must be there, but it cannot be so there, that means so distant, that we can never reach it. So it must be within our conceptual structure, and that is what Putnam says, and that is what Michael Dement also agrees, because reality must be within the speaker's grasp and within the speaker's linguistic repertoire, and that itself can suggest that anti-realism has come to stay. Now, one more area where anti-realism has made its inroads is the moral theory. Just as we have reality which is within our conceptual structure, so far as metaphysics is concerned, and truth and meaning within our linguistic horizon, within our linguistic framework, so far as semantics is concerned. So also in moral theory, it has been suggested by the anti-realists like Blackburn and many others that moral values cannot be so platonic that we can never reach it. Realists are always committed to the existence of or reality of values, which is independent of the human concept, human feelings, and human attitudes and human sympathies, as Hume was really arguing. So in a sense, the realists are committed to the eternal reality of the values in some kind of a Platonic heaven. But this was unpalatable to the contemporary thinkers because many thought that values have a human origin, have a human locus at least, and human consciousness must be the source of the values. And Hume, before Kant really had suggested of a practical reason, Hume said it is not practical reason, but it is really human sympathy, human passions, and his sympathies, which must be taken as the source of value. So in that sense, value theory must have its origin, or values must have their origin in the human feelings, human heart, and the human mind. So man has to be really brought back again to moral theory. So this is what the anti-realists in moral theory like Blackburn suggest, that values have their locus in the human mind, though they can be projected to the external world. For example, we can say cruelty is there in the external world. It is a disvalue, but cruelty is their external world. They are in the external world. But how? Where does it cruelty come? Cruelty comes from human perception, human moral sensibility. So if that is the case, how can we say that moral values or disvalues are independent of the human mind? So in a sense, anti-realism again in moral theory is telling us that values must be rooted in human mind, but not in my mind or your mind. Values don't have to be subjective. Values are objective because our human mind works in a intersubjective way. So morality cannot be really taken out of the human context. And this is what anti-realism in moral theory has taken a new form. And of course, one can say whether it is a kind of subjectivism, as the famous philosopher, just I forget, the book Inventing Right and Wrong, Ethics Inventing Right and Wrong. So,
McIntyre.
yeah, just, yeah. So,
McIntyre. No?
No, McIntyre, no. McIntyre, no. It is our British philosopher, British.
Yes, yes, yes.
I just forget. Inventing. Ethics, inventing right and wrong. I think this is too much. It is not, you are not inventing right and wrong. You are apprehending it. Your right and wrong is definitely human sensibility, but you are not inventing it. You are inventing is too subjective. And our philosopher really, whom I really forget at this name, he really took ethics towards subjectivism, but that is not the intention of anti-realist. You can be anti-realist while keeping the objectivity of values in place, because values will be there, which everybody has to really follow, or have it to, or if they don't want to follow, they must be able to reject. That means
So Jail Mackey.
Yeah.
Sir, Jail Mackey.
Yeah, Mackey, really, thank you. Mackey really is a subjectivist, but anti-realist may not be a subjectivist. So the point is that to sorry, so there was a disturbance. So the point is that if we go for a summary of this whole debate, let me put it this way, that in this debate, who succeeds and who doesn't succeed, the question doesn't arise. It is a philosophical debate. and philosophers are out to question each other without really destroying each other. Realism has its own place, and anti-realism also has its own place. If we are asked at this point of time whom to favor, we can simply say that there is also a third possibility to withdraw from this debate. That is, the third possibility is to debunk it. And that is what many people do. Wittgenstein himself suggested, if you want to get peace in philosophy, please don't enter into controversy. Controversies are some kind of mistaken theories because they come out of a wrong understanding of the concepts. So let us see whether we can have any benefit from this debate. One benefit is this, that if we read their literature, we feel enlightened, in the sense that we go through the process of exercising our mind, both on the pros and the cons of this debate. Nothing is final in philosophy. This is what one insight we get. This debate can arise again and again when the time will come. In fact, it is there already. For example, McDowell, though he appears to be a realist, in his famous book Mind and World, he appears to be a realist. He's an empiricist and also a soft naturalist. Yes, the world is there. But what next? He suggests the world is within our unbounded conceptual scheme. Look at this language. He's a realist, but he's saying the world is in the space of our reasons. So people are astounded where he is. Is he an idealist or an anti-realist or realist? He says he's both. And sometimes he says he's neither. He doesn't doesn't want to get into it. This is what philosophy is, he says. This is what appears to me. How can you have a world without our rational concepts to capture it? That is the way the world is within the unbounded conceptual scheme. That means he is inviting anti-realism, and some say he is inviting Hegelianism of a certain sort. It is called domesticated Hegelianism. Hegel also said the world is rational. He's saying the world is within the space of reasons. Is there much difference? But he's a realist. The point is, there is a point of view in which we can accommodate both. Kant did it. He accommodated both realism and anti-realism. He was an empirical realist because the knowable world is there, independent of our mind. But at the same time, the world is within our conceptual scheme. Without our concepts, nothing doing. There is no concept, there is no object, there is no causal relation. Without this, without our concepts. So concepts play a major role in constructing what the knowable world is. The world is real. Therefore, he retains the thing in itself. Many people say he is paradoxically retaining it. He is contradicting himself. No, he's saving himself from skepticism. He's saving himself from the idea that there is nothing other than what we know. If everything that we know is within our mind, to put it in a very caricatured way, if everything is constructed by our mind, then what is the reality itself? To that question, he said, yes, reality is there. I'm not denying it, but it is only a limiting concept. We have to retain it. So he is both an idealist and a realist at the same time. He's an anti-realist and also a realist at the same time. Who will be correct? Kant, McDowell, or, for example, Locke, who says, I do not know, there is a substance I don't know. If you don't know, why do you say there is a substance? If you don't know, then say, I don't know anything. So you are a skeptic. But you don't want to be a skeptic. You want to an all-knower philosopher. But at the same time, you say, we don't know what. But that will not do. So in that sense, I think Berkeley was more forthright, in the sense that the reality is definitely what you know. And that is not some kind of, though it is a truism, reality is all that we know is a truism. but nothing really is taken away from reality itself. So in that sense, we can really prefer to be both, depending on how we see it. For example, notion of truth itself. You see, Rorty has really debunked truth. He said truth is not required. All that we require is agreement. If few of us agree today that today is a today is a Tuesday, this is Tuesday. This is true. But how can this be so? There must be some objective reality called Tuesday. Either it is fixed by calendar, universal calendar, then we can say it is a Tuesday. But if we agree, a few of us agree, and how few? Maybe 100,000, 2,000, then why not talk about the entire humanity? But he says, no, it is only the people, peers must agree. But that is a narrow notion of truth. So that truth will not survive. We have to have a universal truth. But that truth cannot be so platonic that we can never reach it. Truth is the goal of philosophy, science, and everything. There is no doubt about it. But truth must be within our reach. At least in somewhere at the end of the day, we must reach truth. That is why perhaps the American philosopher C.S. Parr said that truth must be the end of the inquiry. So somewhere you have to keep truth within the conceptual horizon, within our cognitive horizon. So man must come back to the forefront. This is what the anti-realist debate, realist anti-realist debate has shown us, that you cannot, in the name of science, objective science, in the name of objective metaphysics, you cannot take away the human reality itself, because human reality is so fundamental to our understanding of the universe itself. Who will give us science if human mind is not there? If human minds today becomes like a monkey mind because of some curious natural catastrophe, all human mind becomes a monkey mind. If there is only a monkey mind, there will be no science. There is no monkey science as such. So, in a sense, there is definitely some mystery about the human mind, which creates philosophy, literature, science, and everything. So, how can we really take away human subjectivity, human mind, human first person approach to things? And if that is so fundamental, then let us accept it. And if that requires some kind of revision of our conceptual scheme in the idealist way, let us accept that idealism is not dead. If anti-realism is not dead, idealism is not dead. Those who said the universe as a rational structure, they were not fools. Hegel was not a fool. That he said universe as a rational structure. Who will deny that universe as a rational structure? The universe acts in its own rational way. Only we are unable to accept it because we think we know better than Hegel. Okay, anyway, so if we think that idealism has some truth, if we think that anti-realism has some truth, let us accept in Putnam's famous phrase that we can accept the reality with a human face, we can realism with a human face, we can accept reality with a human face, truth with a human face, and morality also with a human face. The human face is more important. Not that we are subjectivizing everything or we are not becoming existentialist thinkers. We are only suggesting a vital element of the whole cosmic process is the human existence. And let us admit that the human existence, though not the only existence, because cosmic existence is also there, but the human existence must be there to recognize the cosmic existence. With these words, I really conclude my discussion. I will invite questions from our participants. Oh, thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It is wonderful. I know I was feeling that I'm attending your class in Hyderabad University. Very good, very good. As you know, we have listened to Professor Pradhan. Actually, presents the discourse regarding realism, anti-realism debate at his has as it has, as it has taken its shape in the hands of three great philosophers of our time, Dame, Davidson, and Putnam. And also towards the end, he has also, talked about the repercussion of this debate in the field of ethics. I invite our participants to ask questions or clarifications from Professor Pradhan. It's really a great opportunity to have him with us. So please come forward with your questions or comments or clarifications.
Good afternoon, sir. At one place of your lecture,
Good afternoon.
yes, sir. At one place of your lecture, you talked about the language of humanity, in which our conceptual structure is embedded. So, can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yeah. When I say language of humanity, I mean the language which all human beings use. So, in that sense, of course, I don't say English, Hindi, Bengali, or anything. I said language as such. So all human beings are linguistically gifted, and that linguistic capacity has been proved by a great many linguists, is common to all humanity. So in that sense, language is universal. But at the same time, our conceptual structure is also embedded in this language. You see, thought cannot stand outside language. Thought and language go together, as we know, and therefore our thought structure is also embedded in our language structure. That is what I meant. Yes, you are Satyabrata, please tell.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much, sir. And another question, at the end of your lecture, you talked about the human faces of
Yes.
anti-realism for different outcomes. If I am talking about ethics,
Yes.
if we are only talking about the human face of ethics, so don't it bring the charge of anthropocentrism? And we are not paying
Yeah,
attention
you're
to
right.
other life forms, other species like animal emotions.
Yeah, I thought, yes. So far as we talk of the values, like, for example, honesty, sincerity, truthfulness, these are values. Now, these are all human values. So this is what I call human face. I don't anthropomorphize it, because if I say that perhaps nobody else can be honest, though we all know that human beings have the moral capacity to be honest and also to be dishonest also, but that capacity is human. So I'm not excluding that the values are anthropocentric, because in contemporary environmental ethics, there is a debate as to whether nature is anthropocentric, whether nature cannot have a value of its own. Here I agree that nature has a value of its own. But so far as human values are concerned, they are, in that sense, they have a human face. You cannot talk of human ethics unless also you take into account human moral nature or moral sensibility. In that sense, I said that human values must have a human face. Of course, that appears to be tautology, but that is what is sometimes forgotten. We say values are independent of human mind, human consciousness. That can never be.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, any other questions or clarifications?
Thank you, sir. I'm Tamanna from Bangladesh, and maybe I'm the little one here. All of them are scholar and PhD student, but I'm just completed my undergrad. So in previous two classes, I was so frustrated because the concept are too difficult to capture. But this class is so charming. I'm very thankful for it.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And I can see the reflection of Putnam in your face. And maybe you were working with him. I don't know, actually. Sir,
so I met him, not worked with him, though I wanted to, but never. I met him in one of the conferences. I met him. He's so a charming man. Yeah, so excellent a personality he was. Yeah, please tell.
Yes, sir. Sir, I actually want to know that whether I am in a right track to understand or not. Sir, you said that realist want to say that truth is something beyond our reach. That means truth is something abstract. And from this point of view, we can say that it is the most most terrible weakness of a realistic theory about truth. That means truth must be something in our reach. Otherwise, how can we transcend? Because human mind is not so capable to go beyond space and time. So, so it is my observation actually. Sir, I was not able to understand. You said truth works as a predicate of a sentence. Maybe would you please explain it a
When
little
we
bit
say
more?
sentence says snow is white is true. This is the sentence we say it is true. So we say truth is a predicate. The word is true is predicated of the sentence snow is white. And whenever we say some sentence is true, truth is a semantic notion. We cannot say a thought is also true, but generally we say a sentence which expresses a thought is true. We don't say a thing is true or a word is true. So in that sense, sentences have to be the truth bearers. But the question is, unless we say truth is a predicate or an attribute of a sentence, we cannot really situate truth semantically. So in that sense, this is I refer to Donald Davidson's paper, famous paper, Truth and Meaning. You can go through that and see, he says you can know only truth when you ascribe it as a predicate to a sentence. So when you make a predication of a concept of truth to a sentence, then you have to bring in the whole structure which is semantically available. The snow is white is true if and only if snow is white. This whole sentence with a right hand side and a left hand side both really take us to our understanding of the notion of truth. And some say that this is perhaps a correspondence theory of truth in cognito, but actually it is not. It is a straightforward logical truism to say the sentence snow is white is true if and only if snow is white. So this is how the notion of predicate is introduced. Is it
Thank you,
clear?
sir. Yes, sir. Thank you very much for your nice presentation. I'm very much
Okay,
thankful.
thank you so much. Thank you.